Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Troy Munson. And I know that I have in the past spoken volumes of how amazing raw apple cider vinegar is at acidification of the gut, but I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And if you just caught our last podcast on the wonders of potassium, I talked about raw apple cider vinegar and honey being excellent sources of potassium. And potassium is helping exchange water through cells, which then helps cells repair. It helps calcium absorption. It helps with swelling. It helps with detoxification, helps the kidneys. I mean, potassium does so many vital things. And we touched on this honey aspect, but I want to go more in depth into honey and how amazing it is and how this perfect food. I reminisce about they found honey in one of the, not sarcophagi or sarcophaguses, however you want to say it, in an Egyptian tomb, but they found in the tomb honey. And they said it was over like 2,000 or 4,000 years old, and yet the honey was still good. And so this is kind of nature's perfect food. And what we may not understand about honey is bees are quite particular when it comes to flowers. You know, let's say that you and I are looking through, let's say we're at a grocery store and we're looking over avocados. Are you just going to willy-nilly take any avocado? Probably not. You're going to feel for one because maybe you want one that's just ripe. You got a party coming in 2 days. It needs to be close. You want to feel that it's just beautiful and it feels amazing. And you find a couple, 3 that are perfect. Well, bees are kind of the same way with flowers. Let's say on those avocados that we're looking at, like one's really bruised and soft in one area, like, this has been dropped. Another one looks like it's got diseased skin and doesn't look good. Like, I'm not taking that one. So we become choosy when it comes to foods. Well, so do bees. Bees can actually tell when a flower is not very healthy. And it'll move on to the next flower. It's only going to take the very best pollen. And so when it gets back, it starts to eat this pollen, and with saliva is breaking it down so that, if you will, it's almost pre-digested. And now people, when they find out that about honey, they're like, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. I'm not eating honey. It's bee spit. Well, I suppose you could call it that. But ultimately, when it comes to honey, that pre-digested sugar is actually much easier on our digestive system. It takes way less energy out of the body. So it's very energy producing of what our body can do. It's very non-irritating. It's kind of like all these foods out there, we start to hear more and more about allergies, like it's irritating the gut lining. Well, it's so hypoallergenic because it's pre-digested that it tends to not be irritating to almost anybody's gut. Now, every once in a while I hear about somebody being allergic to honey, and I've never asked the question, but most honey out there is high fructose corn syrup that is flavored or honey flavored. It isn't actually honey. You have to actually get raw, real honey. I have a client who has bees, and she brings me the unprocessed, unfiltered, raw, cloudy, beautiful, glorious honey. And it is amazing. And so, here we have this non-irritating to the digestive tract. It's very easily digested by us and obviously easily assimilated into the body, gives immediate energy, because it's this quick demand, and it's not this high glycemic sugar like glucose or fructose or a synthetic sugar. It's lower glycemic sugars because they're pre-digested. Now, interestingly enough, I've always heard of it as tupulose, but tupulose has another name, I believe, called levulose. So tupulose or levulose sugar is like a 40 on the glycemic index, where dextrose, which is the other type of sugar, is a 70 on the glycemic index. So honey in itself is low glycemic, but it has a ton of wonderful vitamins, minerals in it. It's just phenomenal. So honey in and of itself does just amazing stuff for the body. It helps repair for athletes. It's more easily handled by the kidneys. It's even a slight laxative, if you will, for the digestive tract. So it kind of does all these different things. It can even help blood sugar stabilization, even though it is sugar. And finally, it's pretty easy to come by. I mean, nowadays it seems almost like it's difficult. It used to be inexpensive to get raw honey. Now it's like gold. And so that's the one thing, because people are starting to realize that, you know what, this honey thing may be really, really good for me. And honey is excellent added to raw apple cider vinegar. In fact, I find most people that say I can't hardly stomach raw apple cider vinegar, as soon as they start adding honey to it, they find that it's way more palatable and they can do it much easier. And I find the same to be true. And I'm not a honey fan. I don't particularly care for the taste of honey, and I don't particularly like raw apple cider vinegar, but the two together, I don't mind them actually. I find them where it's almost like two wrongs make a right, if you will. It actually tastes better to me to combine them. I find it really fascinating how it does that. But here's some other things. So they did a bunch of research on honey. So I'm just going to read you an excerpt out of a book. At the Colorado Agricultural College in Fort Collins, Dr. W.G. Sackett. So I'm going to assume that this was probably back in about 1950, maybe a little bit earlier. A bacteriologist determined to put honey to the test. He frankly did not believe that honey would destroy bacteria, being antibacterial. Because if here you have a 2,000 or 3,000 year old tomb that you open up, it's got honey in it, and it's still good. Why did the bacteria that's everywhere and the funguses that are everywhere not eat up that sugar, that honey? Well, here's what he found. So in his laboratory, he placed various disease germs, which I don't particularly like the term, but I'll let it slide for now, in a pure honey medium and waited. The results astounded him. Within a few hours' time, or at most a few days, each of the disease microorganisms died. The typhoid fever-producing germs died within 48 hours. Other similar germs called A and B typhosis perished after only 24 hours. A microorganism found in the bowel movements and water, which resembled typhoid bacillus, died in 5 hours. So you're thinking, you know what, if I had honey with me and I was out in the forest and I didn't know if I was going to get giardia, I could probably do some raw honey, and that might actually help me drink the water if I was unable to boil it and I didn't have a life straw or something. And what we already know is raw apple cider vinegar tends to kill all viruses, bacteria too, because it's highly acidic. So let's say you just have both those mixed because you're hiking and you're an athlete and you want quick energy, and now you just add regular stream water to it that you're hoping is hopefully clean, but you're not worried about it because you've added a little honey and raw apple cider vinegar to it. Kind of an interesting concept, really. I'd be a little nervous about it. I've heard of giardia. I've never had it, but I don't want gut cramping like that, I can tell you. I've had similar stuff in the past, and it doesn't sound fun at all. But let's say you're in a pinch. You've got the tools. And so these germs which cause these chronic bronchial pneumonia were dead on the 4th day. So germs that actually cause like some of the scare right now of all the bronchial stuff, they found them perished in 4 days with raw honey. And it was the same with particular bacteria associated with a number of disease conditions like peritonitis, pleuritis, and abscesses. Even dysentery-producing germs were destroyed in 10 hours. Dysentery in the gut. Unhappy stuff. 10 hours. So now you're thinking to your friends that are like doubled over in gut pain because they've eaten something they shouldn't, hey, a little bit of honey might help you. What, are you kidding? I need like antibiotics or something. Nah, you just need some honey, some real honey. So these experiments were conducted by him, but also his contemporaries. Tests were duplicated and substantiated by Dr. A.P. Sturtevant, a bacteriologist in the Bureau of Entomology in Washington, D.C., and by A.J. Lockhead, working in the Division of Bacteriology at Ottawa, Canada. So There are many, many people out there that have done studies on honey, and you can Google them, that it is actually like a bacterial side, if you will. They don't live on it. They can't. And so some of my podcasts where I've talked about a healthy body naturally resists disease because viruses and bacteria don't cause disease in healthy living tissue. Well, if honey is that healthy and that alive, they don't live on it either, which is really quite comforting. So here's some thoughts. I've heard these wisps of things. I've never seen it substantiated, so I'm going to do some research and I'm going to come back and report on this. But we've heard that who don't you feed honey to? You've probably said it already in your mind. Oh, you don't feed infants honey. Well, you know what? I found that to be not true. So now I want to go read that research before I comment on that and come back to you and report on what they find in the past as opposed to what garbage they're selling us now. Did they use the honey that was high fructose corn syrup that was honey flavored? Or did they actually use real raw honey? And what did they really said happen or could possibly happen to an infant? And were there cases involved? And how many cases? Would be interesting, because if it seems like everything does not live in honey, then how could honey have some type of microorganism that would make an infant sick? So those are things that I'm going to report on very shortly and let you know about those things. But this is just kind of a little glimpse into honey. And, if you just want to know, there's a ton of evidence and research on what honey has, like how much copper, how much iron, how much manganese, which is so helpful for arthritis. There have been people that have had arthritis for many years, and they've moved, like one case that they cite in this book particularly, this teacher had arthritis and moved to a different school and was living with these folks that were kind of housing her for a little while. And in the process, the only sweetener they had in their house was raw honey. And so she started using raw honey on all these things. And within just 6 weeks, all of her arthritic pain was gone that she'd suffered with for years and years and years that she thought was incurable. And it's amazing that when we get good minerals in a natural form, that the body performs beautifully like it was designed. And manganese is essential at helping joint tissue repair and soft tissue repair. But the copper that is in the honey is also incredibly important for releasing iron, carrying oxygen, fighting infection, all kinds of things in the body. And so it makes sense that when we do things naturally, that the body begins to perform admirably. And it does so seemingly by magic practically, but it's design. It's just an amazing thing. The amount of vitamin C in honey and pollen is incredible. And so honey is high in vitamin C, and you're thinking, I should do that when I'm ill? Yeah, and you probably should do it every single day of your life. Is a good idea. So again, I hope this whets your appetite for honey, and I hope it makes you think a little bit differently about the bees. And just one more quick note on honey. When you add the bee pollen back into the honey and stir it up, which the bees will do, that's what they feed the queen bee, and she grows bigger and has egg after egg after egg after egg. And she's putting out a lot of energy to create thousands upon thousands of eggs. And she'll live a long, long time being fed royal jelly. So just some ideas. We used to sell royal jelly at our health food store when my parents owned it way back when I was little. I remember it. I didn't like honey, so I didn't eat it, but I loved bee pollen. I would eat bee pollen by the handfuls. I thought it was the best thing ever. So I hope that kind of throws some things into your mind. Until next time, if you have any questions, concerns, shoot me a line. But love to hear it. Until next time, I'm Dr. Troy Munson.